And blessed to be a part of your day. Our great friend, retired U.S. Attorney Chuck Ambrose, joining us here to talk about the memo. Chuck, good to have you with us.
Thanks very much. Good to be here. Happy birthday.
Thank you, sir. Phone number's here, 580-5436, 580-KIDO. When you're not reviewing the news and enjoying retirement here in the state of Idaho, what else are you doing? You've got a burgeoning career here in the publishing business.
Well, I am writing novels. I play in a senior softball league. I'm dealing with a new Siberian Husky puppy, which has more energy than anything I have ever seen before. So, staying busy.
I appreciate that. That was the cue to go into the publishing business, though. A plug for your stuff on Amazon, sir.
I understand that. No, I write under the pen name Mark Rainer, MarcRainer. Have 5 novels out, working on a 6th, and they're doing very well, thankfully.
That's wonderful to hear. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Well, let me hit you with this. If you had created a Russian dossier and had figured out how to manipulate the head of the FBI, get one of his old buddies to investigate the president, could you have come up with this fictional thing that seems to be playing out in the factual world?
I would have had trouble doing so because during all of the years, with the exception of the last few when I worked with the Department of Justice, I never ran into anybody, especially at a higher point, who demonstrated the lack of integrity that Mr. Comey and some others have. I need to go to something that's not getting a lot of play because it serves as the underpinning for understanding how serious this is. And if I could, I would like to read one of the model rules of professional conduct put out by the American Bar Association. This is Canon of Ethics 3.3. It's generally codified into every state canon of ethics for every bar association. I'm going to read it through first briefly and then explain it. In an ex parte proceeding, a lawyer shall inform the court of all material facts known to the lawyer that will enable the tribunal to make an informed decision whether or not the facts are adverse. Now, let's pick all that lawyer stuff apart.
Sure.
An ex parte proceeding is one in which only one party is present before the court, like presenting a warrant to a FISA court. And this duty is elevated because it's not an adverse proceeding where both sides are present and have an opportunity to object. So your duty to be truthful to the court is even higher. A lawyer shall inform the court. That doesn't say should. It doesn't say may. It says shall. That is mandatory language. Must. All material facts known to the lawyer. We know now that all the material facts, including the fact that this dossier was salacious and unverified, in Mr. Comey's own words, were known to them at the time that they presented this FISA application, not once but 4 times to the court. And you're supposed to do that to give the court an opportunity to make an informed decision, quote, whether or not the facts are adverse. So let's put this in street language if we can. If I take a wiretap application into a judge and I tell him, well, we have a source, and most of the time you do. In the drug investigations where I participated, I'd try to have more than one source if I could. You'd have snitch 1 who didn't know that snitch 2 existed, and they may have told you something, and you tell the court, well, this guy's got a criminal record, he's done X, Y, and Z, he's a bad dude, but in this case, we've had the FBI out, or whoever the investigative agency happened to be, and with independent eyes on from investigators, we are able to verify the facts that snitch A or snitch B are both told us because we were watching. We were able to document other facts, such as yes, Mr. D did go to this point on such and such a date. And anything that A and B have told us that we were able to independently verify, we put that forward. Never did we say, well, we've been able to verify Snitch A because we asked him and he told us that was the truth, or he told a reporter, and so when we asked the reporter and got this third-hand hearsay, that was corroboration. It doesn't work that way. So what you have here is admittedly false information being presented repeatedly to a federal judge by attorneys who had an ethical duty to inform the court not only of whatever they learned from Christopher Steele, but Christopher Steele's bias, the fact that his information was false. And none of this seems to have taken place. These are violations of the canons of ethics and the oaths of office by every attorney who participated in presenting this to the FISA court.
Chuck Ambrose joining us here at KIDO Talk Radio. There seems to be a lack of ethics going on in a lot of these cases, especially when we're talking about Peter Strzok and Lisa Page. Chuck, and I don't want to jump around too much, but can you give us some background on them, and why do they still have jobs in the FBI?
I don't have a lot of background on those two, except that I know Mr. Strzok's supposedly a career agent who worked his way up through the intelligence side. But again, if they played a role in collecting this evidence, their bias should have been presented to the court as well. And, I don't know who knew about the various text messages and when they knew it, but if Mr. Mueller and his team knew about it and took any action to get in front of a court, they were required to do so. I do know that all of a sudden Mr. Mueller has now requested a delay in the sentencing of Michael Flynn, and whether or not that is generated by his discovery of these text messages, I don't know. A couple of other interesting things that I stumbled on while I was researching all of the memo. The original judge who approved at least one, and I believe more, of these FISA applications is a judge in the District of Columbia by the name of Rudolph Contreras. He is an Obama appointee. He is also the judge to whom the Michael Flynn case was presented, and then he decided to recuse himself. That case has now been assigned to Judge Emmett Sullivan, who is kind of unique because he was appointed to various judicial positions by both Republicans and Democrats, and he is known not to suffer foolishness well, so that may be a good move. The other thing is that Rod Rosenstein, whose name keeps circulating throughout this process, the guy who appointed Robert Mueller, is a career DOJ guy who originally worked in the public corruption section several years ago, and his first boss during that period of time was Robert Mueller. So this is just an incestuous relationship between Mueller, Rosenstein, Comey, and several others involved in this mess that just keeps getting thicker and thicker.
Well, you've pointed that out before, Chuck. So let's, by the way, 580-5436, 580-KIDO, if you have any questions concerning the memo. Let's go to the relationship that you pointed out to us between Mueller and Comey.
They are, again, both career establishment types. They worked together very closely when Comey was the Deputy Attorney General, the position now held by Rod Rosenstein, and Mueller was the director of the FBI, rather, prior to Comey taking that job from him. So longtime friends, in the current vernacular, you might call them BFFs. And it appears that Comey has really generated this whole process where he decided after being fired by the president that he was going to retaliate, and leaked improperly and illegally several FBI memos to friends of his with the express purpose of getting a special counsel appointed.
Well, and then he admitted to that, which seemed rather, for lack of a better term, immature for someone at Comey's position. And the fact that Comey's tweeting now, I mean, again, Chuck, you have tried cases before the highest levels. You've dealt with these guys. You know them. You know these are people that you have interacted with to some varying degrees. There has to be a level of maturity. And how shocked are you and people that you've worked with in the Justice Department that you've got the former FBI director taking to Twitter to complain?
Well, it shows how immature he is. It shows how sanctimonious and smug he is and has always been. And it has always been his fallback position when confronted by anyone who disagreed with him. Basically, how dare you disagree with me? I am James Comey. And it's beyond me how this whole process could have gotten to the point where we find ourselves, because the more highly placed a target is, the internal regulations of the Department of Justice require that approval levels get higher also. In other words, if you're looking at a presidential candidate, you'd best believe that those internal regulations and delegation levels rise with the target. So in theory, the people approving the targeting have the maturity and judgment and experience to make the correct call. And that's where the process has failed here, because as you very astutely pointed out, we're dealing with somebody who, rather than showing that maturity and judgment, has fallen back on how dare you disagree with me, and his tweets, in addition to his actions, belie that fact.
Our great friend Chuck Ambrose with us here. We'll break down the memo some more at KIDO Talk Radio. Our phone number is 580-5436, 580-KIDO. Chuck, do you believe the deep state exists?
I believe the resistance there exists. Whether or not it's deep is a matter of some disagreement. I mean, it's hiding in plain sight and is pretty shallow from where I sit. Maybe deep state's just a little bit giving them a little bit too much credit. I don't think they're as sneaky as they claim to be. I think that when we look at the text of Mr. Strzok and Ms. Page, that's very apparent.
What about when you talk about Mr. Strzok and Ms. Page? As someone who, I come from a military family, so I'm always very conscious of chain of command, of morals, of ethics, and have the highest appreciation for people in law enforcement and the military. How in the world can these guys thought they would get away with having this anti-Trump group that was texting each other all the time? It seems, again, very juvenile for people at such a high level.
It is juvenile, and it's inexcusable. We've talked before about the boots versus the suits. The career people, by and large, in the Department of Justice and the FBI, with whom it was my privilege to work for 3 decades, I almost never saw this juvenile level of bias, and even when people expressed to me the bias that they very clearly had, they were able to set that aside to do the right thing. That's the oath that you take. It's the goal you try to pursue as anybody working in law enforcement. You might be the most conservative person in the world, but that you do not let that affect the decision that you make in terms of enforcing the law. And quite honestly, it's the reason that I left a year before my full Social Security pension would have taken place, because I kept seeing this time and time again in the Holder-Lynch DOJ, and it got to the point I just couldn't take it anymore. I mentioned Judge Sullivan, who is now taken over the Flynn case. You may remember that Ted Stevens, the senator from Alaska, was under investigation, in fact prosecuted by the Holder DOJ some years back for taking bribes. That whole case was set aside by none other than Judge Sullivan when he found out that the Holder DOJ had been sitting on evidence favorable to Senator Stevens. Once that happened, Holder made this great public proclamation about how they were going to be transparent, and he wasn't going to stand for that. And he tried to throw the two local assistants up in Anchorage under the bus and blame them for it when the case was actually being run by, and those violations were the fault of, his public integrity people in the headquarters in Washington, D.C. So I'm very interested to see how Judge Sullivan takes the information that's now coming to light in the Flynn prosecution, especially since he was charged with making obstructive actions, talking about meetings that happened long after the election was over. How you can call those obstruction into an investigation into meddling in the election is beyond me, and I was surprised that the judge who accepted the plea accepted it under the terms in which it was presented, but now that we know that it was the same judge who signed off on these FISA apps, then maybe that's a little more clear also.
More coming up with Chuck Ambrose. We'll take your calls next, 580-5436, 580-KIDO. Kevin Miller on KIDO Talk Radio. And let's go to the phones. Dwight in Boise joins us now. Dwight, good morning. You're on with our friend Chuck Ambrose.
Good morning, Kevin and Chuck. Chuck, I would want to ask you if you would comment on any of these ideas or questions. What is the power of the people to push the powers of government to launch an investigation, another grand jury investigation into the crimes and corruptions being committed by Mr. Mueller, Mr. Comey, and the rest of them that you've been talking about, and others that maybe you haven't mentioned? And two, could you comment on what Antonin Scalia, if you know about this, what Antonin Scalia said once about the grand jury being a fourth branch of government? And three, what do you know, if anything, about the power of a local grand jury, like an Ada County grand jury, if the feds are committing crimes and corruptions in Idaho or in Ada County? A grand jury, and I mean a theoretical power. I quite understand the resistance of the prosecutor to this, but the grand jurors themselves to go after the feds and even a federal grand jury or a federal prosecutor if they're committing crimes on the local level.
Okay, well, let's start with your first question, and I'll try to remember all of these. Unfortunately, under the statutory scheme that confronts us right now, I think we're faced with one of the few very big mistakes that the president has made, and by that I'm referring to the appointment of Jeff Sessions as Attorney General. It's that office that's going to have to appoint another special prosecutor if one's going to be appointed. Let's do this. You know, the left is now saying, after this exposure of the total collapse of the dossier and these FISA warrants, well, no, that doesn't have any effect on anything else, because we're really talking about the origin of this investigation going back to George Papadopoulos shooting off his mouth in a bar in some foreign country and being overheard, I think, by an Australian, and asking maybe if the Russians do have these missing Hillary emails, maybe they could bring them to us. Let's change that scenario to, instead of George and this third party being an Australian, let's say that the source's name is Glenn Simpson or Fusion, and that the third party between our target is named Christopher Steele, and that $12 million have changed hands. If the Papadopoulos scenario is enough to appoint a special counsel to look into that, then I would suggest that that other alternative scenario in which you're talking about Fusion GPS and Christopher Steele more than justifies the appointment of that other special counsel. Now, with respect to the grand jury, grand juries, like any other bodies, are composed of people. I have seen very aggressive grand juries who wanted to look beyond the request that prosecutors were making of them, and they have that statutory authority to do so. I have seen the very passive grand juries who were just trusting the prosecutor to do the right thing, which is going back again to the what I used to call a sacred duty of the prosecutor, not to mislead anybody. Attorneys who are not prosecutors represent clients. Prosecutors, and especially high-level Justice Department prosecutors, are supposed to have one goal in mind, and that's to do the right thing, which is why this whole scenario shocks me even more. The last couple of questions you had about the authority of a grand jury outside Washington or anywhere else to try and take on people like Comey and Mueller and whatever they may be involved in goes back to jurisdiction and venue. These are concepts having to do with the statute and violation under consideration and where it occurred. So the authority of, say, an Ada County grand jury to even undertake any investigation into violations of federal law would be limited by that fact.
All right, Dwight, thank you for the call. Chuck, please stand by. And let's find out what's happening in your world. Good morning, Maggie. And don't forget, our big birthday party will be at Dave & Buster's coming up on Saturday. More details, KIDOTalkRadio.com. Before we get back to our great friend Chuck Ambrose, we go to New Hampshire, where my sister, Missy Miller, joins us now. Good morning, Missy.
Good morning and happy birthday.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Yes, I wish I was there with you guys to celebrate.
I wish I was there to celebrate, but it's a little cold there.
Oh, it is a lot cold here. And it's very nice out there.
It is, and of course you've been to Idaho a few times. Your thoughts on the Gem State?
Oh my gosh, I love it out there. I just wish it was closer so we could go more often. It's great. It's beautiful.
Well, you and me both, Missy. Of course, you've been teasing me a lot about my age lately.
Oh, 50. I can't believe you're 50 because it makes me feel older too. Me turning older doesn't bother me, but you turning 50 bothers me.
You turning older doesn't bother me. Me turning older bothers me as well.
Yes. Yes. I've heard all your callers call in and wish you happy birthday. Dave from Ohio and Senator Bob Smith, all our people.
Exactly. I wonder who gave him that idea.
I wonder. I bet she's hanging around, going to call.
Well, maybe she'll do that next hour.
Maybe. I'm here at work, and I want to say hi to all my kiddos because I have it all on in the classroom.
Well, I'm glad that we don't call them kiddos. They're KIDOs.
Oh, yeah, but KIDOs.
Well,
That's
hello
funny.
to all your students, and you better behave, because if not, I'll come all the way from Idaho to take care of you, little rugrats.
Yes, I showed them your picture, and they've been listening this morning.
That's a very intimidating picture, especially that of a turkey.
The turkey one's fun. They all love the turkey commercials.
Well,
I do show them those.
Well, thank you for calling in, Missy. I love you, and I really appreciate it.
I love you too. Have a great day and happy birthday.
We'll be thinking about you in April. Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Hang on, more coming up with our great friend Chuck Ambrose in a minute. Quickly, one more time, we go to our great friend Annie joining us from New Hampshire at KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Annie.
Hey, this is Whitewater Travelgate. Vince Foster rolled up in a rug, 1,000 FBI files missing because Hillary took them. Annie, and I could say a lot more on that list, but you don't have the time. So, happy birthday, Kevin.
My old friend Travelgate Annie from the first incarnation of this program 23 years ago this month.
Imagine that, Kevin. It's unbelievable. Time is just whipping by, isn't it? Slow down. Somebody do something, you know? Holy mackerel. We need some science fiction to intercede here, you know?
If we could only go back. Still employed.
Still employed. Good man. Me too, just not in the radio business, but that's all right, you know. I was just thinking of my mom today because she was your biggest fan. You know, she absolutely adored you. You know that.
Miss Terry, yes. Mm-hmm.
Yes, Conspiracy Terry.
Conspiracy Terry, yes.
Yeah, she always had a conspiracy, you know that. So But how's everybody? How's your family? How's the critters?
They're doing well. Bama, Carolina, little Buster, they're still with us.
Oh, yeah. Holy crap, huh? It's unbelievable, Kevin, that you're 50. I just turned 60.
Well, I'll see you there soon.
I hope so. When are you coming? Oh, you mean you're going to turn 60 soon? You're just a baby. You kidding me? I just turned 60.
Well, you could have fooled me. I thought you were 40.
Oh, God bless you. You're a fine human being. You know that, though. I tell you that all the time because you always say nice things to me. So, but yeah, Jim says to say hi and happy birthday. Doing anything big for your 50th birthday?
We're going to be at Dave & Buster's February 10th. You and Jim are welcome to come.
David Buster's. Now, what's that? Like the local? What do we have here? Like Jillian's or something like that? Or
it's like a gaming place.
Oh, yeah. Well, I don't think we have that here. We have a lot of stuff here that we didn't used to have, as you probably are aware. Gangs and whatnot. So, it's it's everywhere, and hopefully, and thank you, God, for not letting Hillary Clinton be president right now. I thank God every day for that. Really,
it's a blessing. Huge blessing.
It is such a blessing. Yeah, and I think as time goes on, people are going to realize that, and hopefully more stuff will come out with these memos and everything. It's just, it's unimaginable to me that she would be president, and who could sleep that night, right? That was just horrendous. But I will keep you. You probably have a lot of callers. A lot of people want to say hi and happy birthday, and hopefully we do see you soon. And I don't mean because you're going to be 60 soon. I mean because you're coming to New Hampshire soon. That's what I hope.
Annie, much love to you and Jim. Thank you.
Oh, my God, I love you, Kevin. Hopefully we'll see you soon. Hi to your family.
Okay. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye, Kevin.
All right. Chuck Ambrose back with us again, taking your phone calls. You remember when you turned 50?
Yeah, it's been a while, but I do. I think it was either that or 40 that I came home and my wife had black balloons in every room and a big one from the deck that the whole neighborhood could see, so she rubbed it in pretty well.
I'll reserve comment. Let's go to Cindy in Caldwell with Chuck Ambrose at KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Cindy.
Well, good morning, Kevin. Thank you for having the lady on from New Hampshire, a state I used to vacation in a lot. But just a quick Irish blessing. May the Lord bless you and keep you, Kevin. And may the Lord make his face to shine upon you, because I'm hoping you're having a good and godly day. And speaking of God, I'd like to ask the gentleman, the author, and thanks for being out there. I'm looking at the American Creed by William Tyler Page. I'm looking at the preamble to the Constitution and a paper from our VFW we used to hand out on Americanism. And the tragedy with this, it's just, I guess I have to use witch hunt because I don't even see how this would even come close to providing and promoting the general defense of the populace of the United States of America. I don't know how these people, that you cannot consider them, I'm going to use a very strong word, traitorous, because I find how can you have an unfailing love of country, loyalty to its institutions and ideals, eagerness to defend it, allegiance to the desire to secure blessings for all, and liberty. How, sir, I would just like to ask you, how is that word, when you look up traitor, not even used for Comey and all these other people? I don't see them as juvenile. I see them as sinful, malevolent. I mean, just doing about everything you can instead of getting this nation together, but do everything according the opposite of the American creed, Americanism, and to continually divide this nation. Not only that, it sickens me the amount of money, isn't it our taxpayer money that continually is spent on these lawyers, sir? So how do you speak to them and the word traitor, us?
Well, I actually think you're correct. Of course, if you talk to these folks, they don't think they're committing treason, and unfortunately, that is the real problem here. The egos involved are so huge that they feel very comfortable in substituting their judgment over the will of the people as expressed in an election. Because being part of this establishment class, they truly believe themselves to be elite, knowing better than the rest of us, thinking that they should be able to pick and choose winners, not only in elections but in government grants and everything else. And, far be it that us poor slobs in flyover country should overturn the will of the elites on the coasts or in Washington, D.C. But yes, it goes directly contrary to everything expressed in the Constitution and the wisdom of the framers. So what do we have? We have lies being told to a court, not only of omission, but of commission, I would argue, because they are withholding the material facts concerning Christopher Steele and his lies, and yet holding them up to be enough to issue surveillance warrants on, not on foreign agents, but on an American citizen. And regardless of the merits of looking at Carter Page for anything, these process violations that these guys committed are just inexcusable. Kevin mentioned that, we're supposed to have higher authority and maturity at this level, and yet I've seen better maturity and better conscientiousness and ethics from street-level agents and attorneys than I ever have from these people who made it to the highest levels of the FBI and DOJ, and it's pretty sickening.
Cindy, thank you for the call. Let's continue on to Julie in Boise with a question for Chuck Ambrose at KIDO Talk Radio.
Yes, thank you, and happy birthday. I wanted to know, as far as obstruction of justice, Jeff Sessions had to recuse himself because he was involved with the Trump campaign. But knowing what we know now, all these players were on the committee were involved with Clinton in her foundation, the dossier, the plutonium, you name it. So can that be construed as obstruction of justice, forcing Jeff Sessions to recuse himself for over a year?
Well, it's arguable whether or not Mr. Sessions actually had to recuse himself. The general standard for recusal is that you're supposed to avoid even the appearance of impropriety. I don't believe anybody has actually said that Mr. Sessions did anything inappropriate, but his ethics advisors told him that simply because he had been on the Trump campaign as an advisor, that it might have the appearance of impropriety, and the wiser thing to do would be to recuse himself. You can debate that forwards and backwards. My take on it is that if that specter had been out there, then it should have been something looked at before he was ever appointed, and he should have had a frank discussion with the president and said, if this comes up, I don't think I can do my job, so you should probably appoint someone else, and we wouldn't be in this mess. But looking at what we know now, if I were the Attorney General, and God knows I'm not lobbying for the job, I've worked in Washington and I never want to go back. But if I were in Attorney General Sessions' shoes right now, given the fact that everybody who signed off on this application or any of its extensions has almost by definition failed to do their job in terms of candor to the court, I would ask for the resignations of every one of them immediately, and that would include Rosenstein, even Dana Bente, who did the right thing after Sally Yates got fired. Certainly any attorney involved in this at the FBI level, and then I would can the agents involved too, because there have been lies to a court, and that is inexcusable.
And the people that are still there, they still have clearance. They can access anything. Can Jeff Sessions remove his recusal at this point, knowing what he knows now, that Trump didn't do anything? And unless the Democrats raise holy whatever it is.
Well, they're going to raise holy hell regardless of what happens. If President Trump were to fire Sessions, fire Rosenstein, then you're going to hear Saturday Night Massacre language all over again. I mean, that's going to happen regardless. So that shouldn't be the test. I just really wish that someone would act on one principle alone, and I can't believe I'm going to quote Spike Lee, but let's do the right thing.
All right, Julie, thank you for listening to KIDO Talk Radio. More coming up next. You're listening to KIDO Talk Radio. And we continue on with our great friend Chuck Ambrose. We go to Hank in Boise. Quickly for Chuck Ambrose, Hank.
Good morning. Why Mr. Rosenstein fired? Because he knew those FISA applications that he sent in were false based on that Steele memorandum. Why in the heck can't they fire him? Why can't? What's wrong with Sessions? I thought Sessions was a tougher individual than he is. I can't believe and why can't they clean out the Justice Department and get new appointment, get the Obama leftovers out of there?
I wish they would. I wish they could. Unfortunately, as I indicated earlier, Mr. Sessions has not shown himself to be someone who can control the swamp rats, if that's what you want to call them, that are around him. In fact, just a couple of days ago, he was in the Great Hall, which is the ceremonial room in the main Justice Building, praising Rod Rosenstein and his great career. So I don't have a whole lot of optimism that as long as he's going to remain as Attorney General, the right thing will be done.
No, that's a shame, and I sure hope and one more real quick. When's your birthday party? It kind of makes me feel old because 50 years ago I was working for the Idaho Food King.
It's February 10th at Dave & Buster's from 4 to 6, Hank.
Okay. I'll try to get over there.
Hope to see you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Before we get to Terry, let's get to traffic and weather together. And let's go to Terry, formerly of State College, for our friend Chuck Ambrose here at KIDO Talk Radio.
Good morning. And, Kevin, congratulations. You're now over the crest of the hill. But, we love you, so we will accommodate all your every need as you enter towards the golden years of your life. But, Mr. Ambrose, question for you. Mr. Nunes told us that we've left Phase 1. We're going into Phase 2. He's going to be looking into the State Department. And my question there is, does, in fact, the State Department have its own legal group separate from the DOJ? And if so, how complicated could this get?
Well, each department has its own inspector general. And, anytime you look at one of those offices, you have to also look at the person who is holding that office. I've heard a lot of congressional folks talk about their optimism that Michael Horowitz, the Justice Department IG, will get to the bottom of a lot of this malfeasance in DOJ and FBI. I don't know who the IG at the State Department is. I know that a lot of the Judicial Watch suits against the State Department regarding Hillary emails have had to deal with that office, and that, some exposure has been given there, but each of those federal departments is its own enclave. Each has its own set of personalities. Each has its own problems. And state probably has the most deep state people of all, because they were working not only with Hillary Clinton herself, but with John Kerry. And you can see from the procedures in the Judicial Watch suits the depths that they have gone and the steps they have taken to avoid any transparency with her abuse of her emails and security systems.
Well, then could we be getting into the deeper part of the swamp, per se?
Well, I have a lot of faith based on what Mr. Nunes and his committee have done so far, and they have jurisdiction and oversight over all the federal agencies. I think you could see queries into the State Department, into CIA, into the NSA, and I don't know where it's going to lead, because all of this is classified material. You'll probably also see the continuing squawks from the left about how we're attacking these institutions. They were all saying that, this memo was going to reveal FBI sources and methods, and yet when the memo comes out, the only source disclosed is Christopher Steele, whose name has been on Front Street for months, so that's not a problem. And the only method supposedly disclosed is that the FBI used a source. And if that's news to anybody, then it shouldn't be. I think any lower-level Chicago street thug or a first-time watcher of any, crime drama on television knew that already, so I really don't see that any damage has been done in the process.
Terry, thank you for that. We appreciate it. Chuck, we've got about 30 seconds left. What should we be looking forward to?
I wish we could look forward to action on the part of the Attorney General. I just don't see that, given the statements that he has recently made. He seems content to let this process take its course. I think that's the most unfortunate thing here. Action should be coming a lot harder. He might actually roll over and do what Congress has been asking him to do for months, and at least appoint a second special prosecutor to look into all of this mess.
Chuck Ambrose, we appreciate you. Thank you, sir. You're listening to KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning.